welcome to the Entertainment Science Fiction Programming Network, your entertainment sci-fi programming network. And we say Zao An, Ohayo gozaimasu, Zao Shanghao, Bonjour, Buenos dias, and hello. Welcome. Today we're talking about what inspired George Lucas to do Star Wars. Because so many people watch Star Wars and it's like the beginning for them of sci-fi. And they go into many sci-fi ventures from Star Wars. But what inspired George Lucas? We know, and watching this podcast, you will know. Star Wars, created by George Lucas, released May 25, 1977. George Lucas is born May 14, 1944. So what did George Lucas see that inspired him to do Star Wars? What he saw between 1940s to 1970s that inspired him. George Lucas himself said, let's go with what he said himself, that the 1958 Japanese film, The Hidden Fortress, was a huge inspiration to him to produce Star Wars. He also gives credit to a written work in 1949 by Joseph Campbell, the work of Joseph Campbell called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And he says that had a great influence on him. Now, there were many science fiction movies before 1977, and those movies, for a fact, inspired George Lucas to do science fiction film. And we're going to talk about that, and also TV series that we'll note also. The first ever science fiction film was in 1902 by a French filmmaker, Georges Méliès, in French. Georges Méliès. If you want English, Georges Méliès. The first ever science fiction film, 1902, called A Trip to the Moon by French filmmaker Georges Méliès. The Shakespeare of sci-fi, H.G. Wells, H.G. Wells, also known as the Shakespeare of sci-fi, had to also inspire George Lucas or influence George Lucas, because H.G. Wells in the 1890s describes mobile phones. And in the 1890s, the father of the Shakespeare sci-fi, H.G. Wells, describes mobile phones, automatic doors, nuclear weapons. Let's take films of the Shakespeare sci-fi, such as The Island of Dr. Moreau, 1896. The Time Machine, 1895. The War of the Worlds, 1898, not films with books, writings of Shakespeare, 1800. The first ever sci-fi film was 1902. War of the Worlds, 1898. H.G. Wells' work, War of the Worlds, inspires Orson Welles. H.G. Wells, no relation, sharing the same last name, but no relation. Orson Welles' radio broadcast, The War of the Worlds, came out on October 30, 1938, and that was a recast of the sci-fi novel by H.G. Wells, The War of the Worlds, and that shook a lot of people. Likely also George Lucas. So we're casting that sci-fi films influenced George Lucas. Jules Verne, another Frenchman, Jules Verne, a Frenchman born 1828, and it's debatable if Jules Verne or Jules Verne is the father of sci-fi. Wrote over 50 sci-fi novels, and his novels that he wrote, Jules Verne's wrote, laid the groundwork for modern day sci-fi. So you think Jules Verne's novels that he wrote laying the groundwork for modern day sci-fi had no influence on George Lucas? Of course it did. Jules Verne was friends with another Frenchman, Alexandre Dumas, or you may know him as Alexander Dumas. And as soon as I say Alexander Dumas, you're saying, oh, yeah, the Three Musketeers. Yeah, Alexander Dumas, the man in the Iron Mask. Yes, friends with Jules Verne. Jules Verne's science fiction novels, such as Journey to the Center of the Earth, influenced so many professionals. It's influenced rocket scientists, submarine designers, polar explorers, cosmonauts, George Lucas, of course. Sci-fi movies that George Lucas knew about or saw before creating Star Wars. We said it, the first ever sci-fi movie by Georges Méliès, A Trip to the Moon, 1902. 1927, Metropolis, The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. War of the Worlds, 1953. Planet of the Apes, 1968. 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. Fantastic Planet, 1973. Andromeda Strain, 1971. Solaris, 1976. And all of those are before 1977, when Star Wars came out. Definite influence on George Lucas. So we're going to leave movies a little bit. Let's get away from movies and let's go slightly to television and look at the TV series that George Lucas saw or knew about, had to have an influence on George Lucas and Star Wars. Flash Gordon, 1954 TV series. You feel the influence? Flash, Dale Arden and Dr. Zarkov, in the year 3203, worked for the Galactic Bureau of Investigation. Not the Federal Bureau, which is here just United States, but for the Galactic Bureau, the Bureau of Investigation for the entire galaxy. Flash Gordon and Dr. Zarkov worked for. And so they traveling the galaxy in the skyship. What skyship? The skyship. What's the name of their skyship? Skyship. They're traveling the galaxy in 3203 in the skyship, saving the universe from cosmic criminals. So Flash Gordon first came out as a comic book created by Alex Raymond in 1934. And then later on, 1954, Flash Gordon, the TV series.